Jimmy! Pokémon X and Y come out today, but you need to review Black and White first.
Sorry, man, I can't do that. I'm doing math homework.
There's no time for that.
How did you get in my house?
There's no time for that.
Why are you dressed as a banana?
There's no time for that.
Fine, do you have the game with you?
You bet I do.
No. Hey guys, what's up? It's Jimmy, and the 6th generation of Pokemon is upon us as of today. But let's take a look at the last one as it comes to a close. Today we're taking a look at Pokemon Black and White for the Nintendo DS. Pokemon Black and White were the 2nd generation of Pokemon games to be on the Nintendo DS. This meant Game Freak had some groundwork to grow off of and really perfect Pokemon on the platform. Game Freak wanted to make these games quite different from their past iterations, while still keeping that Pokemon feeling many have come to love. Did they succeed? Let's find out. The game begins with the traditional introductory scene where we're greeted by the region's professor, Professor Juniper, who, if you didn't notice, happens to be a woman. Good work, Game Freak, keep that diversity in the workforce going. The adventure takes place in the distant region called Unova, and our story follows a young Pokemon trainer, Hilbert or Hilda, and their 2 friends, Chiren and Bianca. Chiren is a snarky, arrogant, and intellectual guy that knows a lot about Pokemon and strives to be a strong Pokemon trainer. Bianca, on the other hand, is a flighty, innocent, and energetic young girl that lacks a bit of confidence in her abilities. On your journey to be the very best like no one ever was and complete the Pokédex for Professor Juniper, you'll have to deal with the menacing Team Plasma, who don't seem all that evil when you look at their motives. They want to have a world where people and Pokemon are separated from each other, and feel that people are evil and do nothing but harm their Pokemon. However, the way they try to execute their plans often end in them causing mischief, stealing Pokemon, and battling you, which aren't they supposed to be against doing? Either way, their mindset definitely got me thinking about whether it's just or not to actually have Pokemon fight each other. It was pretty interesting. Now, Pokemon games have all had a theme up until this point. Generation 1 was focused on experimentation and genetics. Generation 2 focused on myths and ancient legends. Generation 3 focused on how nature had a balance, and disrupting that balance can lead to chaos. Generation 4 focused on the origins of the Pokemon world as well as time and space. And Generation 5's main theme is a battle of ideals. It's evident throughout the whole game. The legendary Pokemon Reshiram and Zekrom were once a single dragon, but split apart to fit the plans of 2 brothers with different ideals. This theme carries over into the story as well. Now this part is going to get a bit spoiler heavy, so click the annotation on screen to skip ahead. The first conflict is between Bianca and her father. From the beginning of the game, they're shown to disagree on the concept of young people going out on a journey by themselves. Bianca has never been the most confident individual, and she wants to use this journey to find confidence in herself. And she also wants to explore the world that she lives in. However, her father is holding her back. It isn't until Elisa shows up to side with Bianca and convince her father that going on a journey is a good thing. This conflict is resolved rather early, but it's still an important one. The next is between Chiren and a number of characters. The most notable being Alder, the Unova region champion. Chiren strives for strength. It's all he seems to think about and want when it comes to training his Pokemon. This clashes with what Alder believes. Alder believes trust and love in the Pokemon you're raising are the keys to victory. Chiren loses to you a number of times before finally realizing how wrong he was when he went about training his Pokemon. The biggest conflict of them all, however, which also has some of my main complaints with the game's story, is between you and Team Plasma, along with their king, N. While the other conflicts had 2 defined sides, the game doesn't really decide how you should feel. You can form your own opinion on the way Team Plasma acts and thinks. N especially wants a world without Pokeballs and Pokemon battles. He doesn't want people and Pokemon to coexist at all. This conflict takes major priority in the game, and it's one of the most explored ones. This was Game Freak's chance to really go in-depth about something that was sort of a running joke towards the franchise by players. Pokemon battles are like dog fights. Pokemon battles are like animal abuse. So what did they do? Well, they don't do a good job of going all the way. All neutrality you could have had in the situation is taken away when the game reveals, though pretty obvious the whole time, that Ghetsis was only using N's strong will and ideals for his own gain. He nor most of Team Plasma cared for the well-being of Pokemon like they said they did. Ghetsis wanted to be the only one left with Pokemon, so that way when he took over the world, nobody could try and stop him. This pretty much says that everything he thought was complete bull and shouldn't be taken seriously, so there's no real answer to the main question. Are Pokemon battles and training humane? The game pretty much decides for you in a way that Pokemon battles are good, and what Team Plasma said meant nothing. It's an interesting twist, and the games had some real potential to give us a satisfying ending, but they fall just short of what they could have been, and that's a bit frustrating. Now don't get me wrong, a lot of the things I liked about this game's story had to do with how involved it was. Pokemon games have never been praised for their storytelling, and that's understandable. It's never been the main focus of the game. The stories have been getting more and more involved with each generation, but they seem more like a side story to me rather than the main narrative. Pokemon Black and White changed this and decided to make the story the main focus, and the player became quite involved in the events of the game. Every single area seemed to have significance to the overall plot. While this could be seen as a good thing, it gave the game a feeling of linearity, which while present in portions of previous games was never this dramatic. I definitely see why people would find this to be a problem. Pokemon games, while not incredibly story-driven, do have stories to tell. The stories are the ones the player makes for themselves. Tough gym battles and moments of evolution are the game's story, and because of that good amount of freedom past games gave, each player had a similar experience conceptually, but they all have different memories of their time with the game. Again, while I do appreciate the inclusion of a more adult, for a lack of a better word, story in these games, I could definitely see why people would have the issues they did with Black and White. Pokemon Black and White weren't all bad though. The 5th generation of games made a lot of great changes to the series. Simple things like making TMs reusable and increasing the battle speed ever so slightly made a huge impact. You could also find rare Pokemon in rustling grass, including the experienced boat Audino, which makes leveling up your Pokemon a breeze. A new concept of double battle grass was introduced, which added a way to find more Pokemon at once that were also higher leveled. There were also a lot of design choices in Black and White that I liked a lot too. They cut down the use of HM moves dramatically. The only two I believe that were required for the game were Cut and Surf. Of course, other moves like Fly are available, but the region is designed so you're never halted because you don't have the HM you need, which I really appreciated. There were also a lot of changes to the online mode of the game. The item called the Sea Gear, which is always present on the bottom screen, is your main source of interaction with other players. The easy to set up battles through infrared connection made playing with other Pokemon fans much less tedious than in the past. The biggest change was to the metagame. This change was the inclusion of Dream World abilities. The Dream World is an online service that boils down to a bunch of really simple minigames that you can play to earn virtual items. However, you can also find unique Pokemon in the Dream World as well, ones with special abilities. It's a really neat concept that changed the way a lot of battles were played, and gave a lot of older Pokemon new strategies. Though not used too often, 2 new battle styles were introduced in Black and White. The first being triple battles, where 3 Pokemon are on a field and act in the same turn. The second being rotation battles, where 3 Pokemon are on the field at once, but they attack one at a time while rotating positions. They were cool ideas, but I never liked them too much myself. Another thing I really loved was the way Game Freak made Unova feel alive. It was filled with huge cities, consisting of a ton of different types of people, many of which were different races, again bringing diversity into the Pokemon world. Unova also changes seasons each month. Certain Pokemon will change color or appear in different numbers depending on whether it's spring, summer, winter, or fall. Pokemon Black and White added a few things that were really replacements for old features. Instead of contests like in past games, Black and White had musicals, which were not as interactive as contests and had no real benefit whatsoever. The second was a lack of a battle frontier or battle tower. Instead, we got the Battle Subway, which is like the Battle Tower, but I wish it included some of the different ways to battle that the Battle Frontier facilities had to offer, such as rental Pokemon, for example. This brings me to something that I didn't like so much about Black and White. In spite of the many improvements it made to other mechanics, the polish from Heart Gold and Soul Silver didn't carry over. You couldn't hear the sounds of your footsteps in buildings or on dirt paths. It was a really minor detail, but it was very strange to me that it was left out. You also didn't have the option to have your Pokemon follow you around anymore. I know it's probably because there was a greater use of 3D models in the overworld, which I'll talk about more later, but it would have been really nice to have that in the game. The bottom screen was completely used up by the Sea Gear, which I almost never had turned on, so it was almost useless. It ditched the really useful options that it had in Heart Gold Soul Silver, and that really annoyed me. They also took out the ability to toggle the run button to be on at all times, which sort of annoyed me, but I always hold B anyway, so it wasn't that big a deal. Unova also lacked both a game corner, though that's understandable due to legal reasons, and a safari zone. And of course, like I said earlier, a true battle frontier. Not to mention the post-game was barren and there was a huge level spike after the Elite Four. Pokémon Black and White, like every Pokémon game, have their fair share of fans that couldn't connect to it like they did with past entries. However, this was only exacerbated by the fact that Univa's Pokédex consisted of nothing but new Pokémon. Black and White felt like they were severing ties with their roots. The Unova region was incredibly far away from the regions of past games, and we don't see many hints or nods to the events of what happened around the world. While other Pokémon games took older Pokémon and added them to a list of new Pokémon to make up that region's Pokédex, Black and White from start to finish was filled with 156 completely original monsters and nothing else. I personally was open to the change, because it meant you would need to rely on all new strategies. You couldn't just use a few older Pokemon that you were familiar with to make sure you knew what you were doing on your quest. You need to test out each one to see which are the best of the bunch for your team. It was meant to make things feel fresh, however, it led to unfamiliarity and made some people feel a bit uneasy. Now in terms of presentation, Pokemon Black and White are really quite beautiful games. Pokemon have animated sprites in battle, which honestly could have been done in Diamond and Pearl, and human sprites are a bit taller than they have been in past games, allowing for more detail. There was a lot more use of 3D models for towns and cities. Bridges are everywhere and they're really fun to look at, and Castelia City, Unova's biggest city, is made almost entirely out of 3D models. Everything felt very grand in Unova, which could have had to do with the setting being the New York metropolitan area. The region's Pokemon were also really nicely designed. Yes, there are a lot that I can see people disliking, but I actually enjoyed how each Pokemon looked. Unova not only looked beautiful, it sounded great too. Each city and town has its own theme, and people with instruments in those towns will sometimes play different parts of the song if you talk to them. Route themes changed slightly in each season, and that was a nice touch, and they even turned the aggravating beeping that plays when your Pokemon is low on health into a song. And when you're fighting a gym leader's last Pokemon, a different song starts playing, and that really gets me in the mood to kick their butt. Overall, while Pokemon Black and White get a lot of negativity from people not liking certain Pokemon designs or thinking the story made the games a bit too linear, they're definitely great games, and if you haven't given them a go yet, definitely try to at some point. If not right now, because I know the Generation 6 craze is about to begin, then maybe someday in the future. Anyway guys, thanks so much for watching this video. If you like what you saw today and you're new to my channel, hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. And that's pretty much it. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter, links are down below in the description, and I'll see you guys next time with more videos.